Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Talking About Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
David, can you tell me what this sound is? Okay. Almost there. One more bit. Oh, it didn't make much of a noise when I snapped it in two. What do you think that was, David?
It sounded like someone snapped some sort of dessert.
It's a Golden North honey giant twin. Although it started off solo, it's now a twin because I've snapped it in two. How long do you think that would have taken you to guess I hadn't given you a clue?
Based on the fact that all I got from this end was a little type sound, it could have been a very long time.
Well, there's a reason I'm doing this. Pardon me. Oh, which will become clear when we get to our perspicacity segment. But we've got 3 to get through between now and then. So I'll just finish this and we'll start.
And I'll just be here being sad, seeing I'm ill and we couldn't be in the same place and I couldn't eat half the ice cream.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development, to realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
David, if I said to you, stop wasting your talent and start making a difference, would you expect me to have been talking to you directly or perhaps reading the subtitle of a book?
I suppose it's a bit of both ways because, again, I know it's a subtitle of a book, but also I think it's nice to challenge your friends occasionally and go, are they living up to their standard they claim to care about? So I'd take it a bit both ways.
I can see the value in that, but I would want you to rest assured that I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I would never correct anybody publicly. That would be a private conversation, not one I'd have on a podcast.
Hey, there's such a thing as editing.
We're talking about Rutger Bregman. He's got a book called Moral Ambition, Stop Wasting Your Talent and Start Making a Difference. And I wanted to bring this up in our person segment because I think all of us, as you were just alluding to, from time to time, we benefit from taking stock and having a thought. And what he does is he comes to this from a broader perspective. And you were saying, David, that this book, while it sounds like it's going to be interesting and you've got it queued up to listen to, a previous book of his was quite excellent.
Yeah, his second book, Humankind, is one of my favourite books because he pretty much set out what will people do when you give them the time, space and resources to do what they want to do. And what he found is that when you give people time, space and resources, the vast majority of people are kind to each other, look after each other, empower each other, and create things together they couldn't create on their own. So it's the most amazing book to remind people what's possible. And I assume this new book, Moral Ambition, is going to be to try and take it the step further to say, hey, if you don't have the time and the opportunity and the resources and no one's let you do with them what you want, what are you going to do to try and get to that better place anyway?
And that's the dilemma or the situation we come from, because we're talking to particularly business owners, small business owners or leaders, because that initial book, if you had a vast staff among you, being able to create that culture where people have the time, the space, the resources, magnificent. It can happen in smaller entities too, don't get me wrong. But I think for us, the focus on, hey, are we giving ourselves that time, space, and resources? In fact, a friend of mine and client, I won't name him in case he doesn't want to be outed for this, he did talk about a concept he's come across for fans of Mad Men. Don Draper would often just disappear for a day and indulge himself in a little bit of time out, a bit of pleasure. And so he and I are talking about the need. We talk about having a mental health day every now and then. This is a Draper day where you just disappear and you just do something to recharge all your batteries, and not even with that focus, just to be with yourself. I think that enmeshes with this Bregman stuff, but perhaps at a very practical level, David.
Rutger Bregman is always going to look at the big picture. That's the kind of guy he is. He wants to work out what you and I could do individually, that if lots and lots of us did it, would affect whole societies. And if it affected multiple societies, would affect the whole world. Like, he's the best form of utopian. I think his first book may have even been called Utopia. I can't remember anymore. But yeah, you want to be able to see the link between the small and the big. And that is, if you find a little bit of time for yourself to get perspective back, to get energy back, to get enthusiasm back, then what can you do with those found resources to empower the people around you to get those things back again? And what will they be able to do? Like, what is the flow-on effect you can create from a little thing you do for yourself and the small circle around you?
And we're recording this not long after the federal election in Australia, 2025, where a lot of pundits are saying that the very surprise pouring of votes heading the way of the ALP and away from the Liberal National Party was perhaps the LNP got a little bit close to the aura of Trump, and there was that fear that made us sort of retract ourselves from that branch of the political spectrum. And that brings us to this little snippet I want to play from Moral Ambition. Well, actually, it's from a conversation that Rutger was having with Sam Harris on his Making Sense podcast, because Sam said, in your previous book, you say about, hey, in history, things always get better. And what I love, there's a nuance here. He basically says, yes, big picture, things are getting better. Things are a bit scary at the moment with some of the backward steps happening in the US, and it's both things at once. Let's have a listen.
So the first line of my very first book, Utopia for Realists, was that in the past, everything was worse. You know, when we zoom out, we see that we've made tremendous progress in many respects. I mean, you know this, right? The massive decline of child mortality, of extreme poverty, especially since the 1980s, progress has been speeding up. So that is wonderful news. And this was more than a decade ago when I was a bit frustrated that it seemed we had arrived at the end of history, and most of my friends on the political left, they mainly knew what they were against growth, against austerity, against the establishment, but they didn't really know what the next big thing was going to be. So in that book, I wanted to say, like, come on, let's think about what could be the new utopian milestone. There's this beautiful quote from Oscar Wilde, who once wrote that, you know, a map without utopia on it is not worth even glancing at because it leaves out the one island where humanity is always landing. Now, I guess I got what I wished for. Things are not boring anymore, but not really the direction I had hoped for, I guess. So I've always loved this statement from Max Roser from Our World in Data, the fantastic website that collects all the data on the state of the world, basically. And I think it's just correct that on the one hand, the world is really bad. We could do so much better. The world has become better. That's also true. We have made progress. And it's all of that at the same time, I would say. Just like you, I'm really, really terrified of what's going on in the United States right now. Things are also happening quicker than I expected. And it's one of the big lessons of history, right? There's nothing inevitable about the way we structured our society right now. It can radically change, and sometimes quite quickly, both for the better and for the worse.
So I take from that, David, that despite some things being challenged around us, like the world order and the alliance between the allied nations, we have to focus on the things we can have control over ourselves. But it's also that reminder, as he pointed out towards the end, that there are things we take for granted that maybe we shouldn't, because they're not here for all time. They need maintenance. Would that be your takeaway as well? And I suppose in a small business scenario, there's some relevance as well.
I think I'll link it to two things. I'll go back to the example of our federal election because it's a good one. What does it really mean that the LNP were too Trump-like? Well, what it really means is they did mean politics that excluded people. They pointed their finger at people and they said it's all about you competing with each other. And Australians quite profoundly said, no, that's not the Australia we want to live in. And that's the really significant thing here is things don't stay the way they are. Entropy means things always deteriorate unless you make an active effort to keep them the same or make them better. There is just no coasting along. Things don't coast. That's not how entropy works. If you don't put energy into things, they deteriorate, they disintegrate, they're gone. And Rutger Bregman is a firm believer in it might be difficult or bad, but what we have to do remains exactly the same. Get up and do the next necessary thing to make it better for yourself and the people you care about and your small business and your staff and your community. And it never ends up being any different to that. You just do that every day, and some days you get a much better outcome. But every day, at least you can be proud that you did the right thing.
And we'll set our compass north aligned with utopia. We may not get there, but we can keep heading in that direction.
Our 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
In the principles section, what a great book you put me onto, David. The Next Conversation by Jefferson Fisher. Did you just get this out of a lucky dip? It was such a beautiful unicorn of a book to read.
No, I was actually specifically looking for a book to help train the client services team in my American job to how to better deal with American attorneys who were struggling through the current economy. And lo and behold, I found this book written by a young American attorney who loves communications. And I'm like, wow, I wish we had 100 clients like Jefferson.
He brings a spatial awareness to the act of communicating with others. And I think that is a really pertinent way of saying it, if I dare say so myself, because when I boiled down what he's on about, he acknowledges that many of the times we go into conversations wearing blinkers, we've got preconceived ideas, we're waiting for our time to speak while the other person's speaking, and we also pay homage to some habits that might not be the best for clear and concise and effective communication. That's my muddling way of trying to define it. How would you succinctly describe Jefferson's approach to the next conversation, which is what this book is about? It's getting us ready to make the next conversation better than the previous one.
I think I'll use his description from early in the book where he is deemed old enough to go away with his uncles and his dad and his granddads and his great-grandfather for the first time on sort of the family hunting trip to the family hunting cabin. He's not big enough yet to, be trusted anywhere near firearms or anything like that. This is not a weird American family. This is just he's now old enough to go along and be involved. And the thrill of this first trip for him is sitting around the cabin in his pajamas when he's 8 or 9, and his uncles and his dad and his grandfather and his great-grandfather are all telling stories about their lives, and everyone's a lawyer or a judge. And it dawns on him, wow, my whole family are involved in the law, but what they all actually love is storytelling. They all love communications. And it meant that from that point onwards, he was sure he was going to be an attorney, but he was also sure he was going to be an attorney who listened to what people said and communicated in a way that tried to be as open and inclusive as possible so that he would have the impact on people that his uncles and his dad and his grandfathers and great-grandfather had on him when he was little. So I really love the fact that he had sort of worked out roughly what he wanted to be, even though he didn't know how to do it as a child, and just kept heading in that direction.
The first night was an experience cemented into my memory. As dinner finished, my grandfather put down his plate and scooted to the edge of his couch seat. He began to tell a story, something about his job, a judge, and a courthouse. I immediately recognized it as the same story he had told my dad earlier that day while we were fixing an old deer blind. Earlier, though, the story was more matter-of-fact. His voice came out plain as he told it while searching for some green paint in his truck bed. But this was special. It was the same words, but it was a very different story. I was entranced, watching as he stood up to reenact the scene. He used his hands and face to give texture to his voice. His volume went up on the exciting parts, low and slow on the intense parts. Even his tone changed. Could this be the same story? He captivated the room for nearly 10 whole minutes. And after a long pause, he delivered the punchline, and the room filled with laughter. I felt as though I had seen a magic show. The whole evening for me had been the discovery of something new, yet strangely familiar, as if I had seen it all before. I remember it immediately felt right to me, like a shoe that fit the first time you tried it on. That night, and for the next 10 years of opening weekends, I received my family's inheritance. I passed on identity, dedicated to advocacy through storytelling. I realized with each year gone by that law was only the family profession. Communication was the true family passion.
So one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up in Principles is there are 3 little things from the many things he talked about in the book that I've been trying to apply in my own communication because I fall foul of them, and he brings great arguments to the table as to why they're worth pushing back against and changing my ways. And one of them is saying sorry. I say sorry a lot, and not always mindfully, never disingenuously, but, oh, sorry about that, or sorry, sorry to disturb you, XYZ. And he said it just undermines your credibility and your genuineness when you cheapen the word sorry. So his argument is, and you can step in and correct me if I go off on the wrong tangent, David. I'm sorry if I do. The main thing he says is, well, let's keep sorry as a word for when we truly are sorry and it has its power. Aside from that, let's have more positively couched conversation that is clear. For example, if you were running a few minutes late for a meeting, instead of coming in and saying, oh, sorry I was late, you could actually say, thank you for waiting for me. Let's start the meeting. I think that's one example that springs to mind, as well as just those accidental and incidental uses of the word sorry that we sometimes don't even know we're saying. I am consciously trying to remove them from my vocabulary. Anything you'd add to the sorryness?
Just, I think the fact that he really wants sorry to have a positive valence. You're saying sorry because it's the right thing to do. But again, your example there of thank you for waiting for me is a brilliant way to give things the right valence. Where possible, start things positively, not negatively. And the other side of it, seeing one of his key points is to always speak from a position of control and confidence. Is saying sorry is immediately giving some of your credibility and authority away. And in his profession as a personal injury attorney in Texas, that is not something you do, in a deposition room or a courtroom with attorneys with 40 years of experience. When you're a young attorney who's walked away from a big firm, is setting up a one-man firm, and is making little videos about communication in the front seat of your truck on the way to your next client.
I just found a little summary here where it says, basically he's saying don't drain your power by saying sorry
Yes.
for things that don't require an apology. Instead, he says, express gratitude or state your needs directly. And here's 2 examples. You say, thank you for your patience instead of sorry I'm late, or I need a moment of your time instead of sorry to bother you. And I think we both agree that's a much more valid way of moving forward.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I wanted to bring up here, and again, I just want to stress, David and I aren't sitting on top of a mountain saying to you, you must learn this. We're talking to ourselves, as we all need reminders of all these little things as we continue on our journeys towards utopia. The second one is about eliminating minimizing language. And if you hear yourself using the word just a lot, that could be the red flag that brings this into play. So, for example, he says, if you say things as, oh, I just wanted to check in. He said, why are you saying just there? Why don't you just say, I wanted to check in? You're minimizing, you're playing down your right to even be part of this conversation. This is a big one. It's an insidious one that can slip in almost unbeknownst to us.
And this is one that I very much saw when I was teaching in universities. It was very much the difference between the guys who would rarely say just and too many of the girls who would say just far too much. And I learned to sort of be hot on getting them out of the habit because, no, they had just as much of a right to talk and they normally had something more valuable to say and had thought about it for longer. So no diminishing language of any kind is acceptable.
And this is just something to be mindful of and work through. So if you find yourself saying just all the time, think about how you can rewrite this. I might follow this up with a blog post at some point to share some thoughts. David, you might have some thoughts to tip into that one as well.
Happy to add.
The third one of the 3 we're just drawing out for the principles section is one where he talks about if you have bad news to deliver, don't beat around the bush. To do so is actually cruel. It's unkind. He uses a great example of someone having to let a person go. And in his first example, he has the boss welcome Sally into the office and say, Sally, how are you today? Good. How have you been enjoying it here? And she goes, well, I've got off to a slow start, but I'm feeling really good and blah, blah. And then he says, well, I have to tell you that I have to let you go. And suddenly it makes the whole thing worse because she would have known intuitively that this day was coming. She hasn't been off to a great start in her new job, but that lovely pleasantry of opening gives her a sense of hope, and then that's just crushed. Alternatively, what he would like that boss to do is say, Sally, come in. Look, this conversation's going to be an uncomfortable one. We do need to let you go. And then explain why, and then have that conversation so that you're not raising any false senses of trying to be hospitable when the other person knows you've got a job to do and you've got to deliver this news. It actually undermines your integrity. You would agree with this, David, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You've got to set legitimate expectations for what's happening in a conversation. Otherwise, in something like Jefferson's first example where you start with all the sunshine and light, it could be perceived that you're literally having fun torturing the person. And they're walking away thinking not only is that a sad day, but that they've just been put through the ringer for someone else's entertainment. And whoever wants to accidentally make someone think they've been put through the ringer for your entertainment?
I hope that was a helpful section for us all to reflect on. If it hasn't been, then I'm sorry.
I'm not.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
In the problem segment, I've got a Facebook post that was publicly shared, so Michael won't mind. Michael Mills, He runs heaps good productions. A friend of mine, he's been a client, and he's never short of coming forward to say what's on his mind. And he has this post that came up just before Mother's Day 2025 saying, "Note to beginners in marketing. It's not a good idea for your hotel group to spam me with multiple emails from each of your many hotels suggesting I book in for a Mother's Day lunch. Also, as I pointed out in my reply email to you and in my review, my mother is dead. So maybe go away. I'm looking at you, the group that owns the Cremorne Hotel." Woof. I think message delivered, David.
I think the problem is with a message like that, he's delivered it very strongly, but will they listen?
Well, it depends. He really just needs to unsubscribe, really, at that level to solve the immediate issue. But there is a deeper one. And it came up at Cafe Belgiorno in Mount Gambier. Dear friends and clients of ours, we did a little ad for them for Mother's Day lunch and dinner with a video vignette which showed some of the disturbing things in the world, just lightly, just touching on them, the ups and downs with the stock market in relation to all what's been happening with tariffs, some images of conflict, and then reminding us that no matter what the world is throwing at us, for many of us, we can salvage the thought that we've had our mum. Our mum's been in our life. And then there's lovely little vignettes of mums caring for their kids, teaching them, showing them how to do things. And then it mentions about the beauty at Mother's Day of being able to share some time with your mum or share some time remembering your mum. And this is a nuance that's increasingly being used in advertising and marketing around Mother's Day and Father's Day, is acknowledging that for some people, their parents aren't there. Now, for some people, they have only bitter negative memories of their parents. That's problematic. But I think there's a sensitivity for those who are looking to be positively embracing these days to acknowledge that for some people it's a memory, for some it's a chance to actually connect. And this is in the problem segment because I think it's something that should be raised to be considered, and every business needs to make its own decision on that. You're particularly fond of the way Etsy handles this, David.
Yeah, I really like the way that Etsy send out emails before the Mother's Day and Father's Day period asking people if they would like to opt out of any ads about these holidays. So if it is a sore point for them or they're grieving, they don't have to see the ads. Like, for a big platform, that's such a good way to handle it.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4. Perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
Finally, David, the perspicacity segment where we think about thinking. We think about how we used to do things and whether they still hold to the test of time or whether things need to change. And because we've been looking after the Golden North ice cream website for many years, I think if it's not 10 years, it's not far off that. Ice cream was on our mind, and that is why I had the giant twin at the beginning of the show.
It's why he ate the whole giant twin.
Well, interestingly,
he ate my half.
And that will become a pertinent point in just a moment. But we like to look at old ads and then just reflect on them. And here's something. I haven't been able to date it, but it's an ad about having a golden day with your little piece of Golden North. Let's have a listen to it. The voice is the voice of the recently retired Trevor Pomeroy, who was apart from being a shareholder in Golden North, their head of marketing.
At Golden North, we've been making our ice cream since 1923 here in the country town of Laura, South Australia, nestled between the Flinders Ranges and the Barossa Valley. And we still make it like we did back then in the golden days, with fresh milk and fresh cream. So you can taste the golden days in every Golden North ice cream and make any day a golden day. Golden North. Make it a golden day.
Now, David, what do we think of this as an advertising message, really looking at the base in the Laura, the connection to land and country here, the fact that all these beautiful products that have come from our farming sector have been fashioned into this product. We've got images of all sorts of families and young people enjoying the product. Where would you peg this in the realm of the sort of style of marketing message?
It's an interesting one because there's sort of two things going on simultaneously. Like if the ad is perhaps somewhere around 20 years old, which was, your best guess without us having a firm date, it's a really nice early use of provenance, but with less detail than we would probably put in now. Like provenance has gone a lot further. We would get into, why we do things the way we do it, who does it, showing how it stayed the same rather than just saying it stayed the same.
And by talking provenance, we're talking about that connection to the origin of the particular product.
Yeah, essentially, if it was wine, we'd say, what is the ground it came from? What is the terroir?
And we even see the big supermarket chains not just saying we sell Australian produce that we've raped and pillaged the growers over their price, but we actually name, well, here's Fred Smith who grows our beans. That's what you're talking about, the way that this...
Yeah, it was an early version, it seems to me. So now it would still work, but it would need to be much deeper.
And then there was another ad that I remember seeing as we were trawling through the Golden North library, available online, of this black and white cow in the middle of a field. A farmer walks up, sits down back to us and starts milking the cow. And as we hear the milk coming out, it's like there's a level of content inside the cow that is draining into the bucket, which means the white bits get diminished as the level inside. It's almost like they were a little see-through window into the creamy goodness inside the cow. Not biologically correct, just in case there's anyone with primary school students watching and they're doing this as a project. But it was actually a nice little visual cue, David, of just reinforcing that the stuff comes from cows and there's that engagement with the farmer, and that's where it's coming from, and that's what you're reading. Very
cute ad. And I think cute ads are always going to be enjoyable. But my question with cute ads always comes down to whether it's, probably 30 years ago or now, 10 years ago and now, it doesn't really matter. Will I remember the cute ad for being cute, or will I remember the product related to the cute ad? And my fear with this is the cow's entertaining, but do I link the cow immediately to Golden North? I do, because I grew up in Gawler in the 1970s looking forward to the next amazing flavour of Golden North in the specialty flavour line. As a little kid, I was addicted to the lime flavour. I was probably the only person who was.
I think, I don't know. I couldn't eat lime all the time, but it's just a wicked treat every now and then.
Yeah, at times it's brilliant. In my family, I was the lime person, which meant I got the whole tub over a month. It was awesome.
You mean you got the lime share?
I did.
Thank you.
Boom, boom.
There was a third piece that I found online I think we'll bring into, particularly for this segment, where we think about what we would do next. And I refer to the giant twin, which is one of their iconic products. It's a big long stick of ice cream, which you can snap in two to share, hence one becomes the twin. And there's a really interesting video that Golden North shared in 2021 of interviews with different twins, recounting their memories. Let's have a listen to this bit in particular.
First memory of giant twins would be our birthdays. These were treats and we were given one, which I thought birthday, you get a whole one.
Our parents had a cafe in Murray Bridge, so giant twins, as a kid growing up, I remember them really well, probably from the 60s.
Growing up, our nana, who always had a deep freezer full of Golden North giant twins, and I don't think it's because she had twin granddaughters. I think she genuinely absolutely loved the brand.
Well, our grandparents used to buy them for us after swimming lessons when we were little. We used to share one.
And we were to share it, and you don't do that to a little kid on their birthday. That's cruel.
And if she made you share them, it was not a good day.
All I remember is that it usually ended in tears, and it did end in tears. That's all I remember.
there's something really scarily refreshing about this being shared by the brand itself, David, of allowing people to say how much the snapping and having to share this ice cream caused fights amid nostalgic remembrances. It's a daring strategy, probably more so now because we seem to have become more selfish than ever before.
There was a time where at the end of the day, you may not have been happy that you had to share. Unless you were a totally out of control toddler, you ended up pretty happy that you got half the giant twin. There's a real power in the honesty of this, that actually most people were pretty unhappy about having to share because they enjoyed it that much. It was their birthday. There should have been 2 giant twins.
I can feel Trevor Pomeroy's hand in here of being a little bit, because you and I talk a lot about how the brain's a prediction machine. And it's trying to predict, and it's going to predict that if Golden North's sharing this stuff, it's just going to be nice and sweet. And then we go, hang on a minute.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Here are some people being unhappy about the product.
Well, unhappy about the fact they couldn't have the whole product.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting contrast. What's clear is they enjoyed the product so much, they were willing to get stroppy, or they got upset because they couldn't have more, which is such an honest human and childlike thing.
So at the time of recording in 2025, if we were suddenly given a chance to sit down and think about what we would do for tapping into some enduring messaging for Golden North, I mean, we can see it's got the pedigree within the community, and we can see that those who are in are really in and almost don't want to share. Do we continue with that message being extrapolated about sharing? Because over time, and this comes back to the book we talked about right at the beginning, about how things have changed historically, you could almost imagine that if you had an ad now with a giant twin, a couple meeting and having their first date, the snapping of the ice cream, the sharing of it, I think would be done happily. There'd be you just want to give each other as much as possible. And then maybe they get married or they're living together for a long time, and gradually we see they have one each.
Yep.
Is that to be celebrated? Is that okay? Or is there something that this reminds us, there is actually joy to be had in that mini taste of sacrifice?
I personally think it's better to make people smile and see the couple going in and buying 2. But then the fun thing would be to fast forward that image 5 years later and they've got a 4-year-old. What do they do then?
Do you, the parents, have one? No. What would the parents share one and give the 4-year-old that would be too much for a 4-year-old.
That'd be too much. So what I'm assuming is the parents probably have, 3/4 of one each, and the little one gets half, and one bit gets teeth marks in it because the parents share. It's all a bit messy, just like life. But I think it is a wonderful, smile-worthy way to look at the fun conundrums of life. We're on a date, we share. We're married and we really like it, or we're a long-term couple. We have one each. Oh, now there's a rugrat. How do we solve this one?
I'd like to think it was Stephen Covey who shared this example, but it might not have been. I might be conflating my memories of how to deal with sharing stuff in a family environment where everyone's close and you've got competition. And he talks about cutting up a pie to share, and what you do is you give one child the role of cutting it up fairly, but they get to get their piece last, which makes them do it fairly. It might have actually been lots of people who've talked about this. Can you imagine the giant twin that is going to be shared, where you say, right, you can snap it in half, because although it's made to be snapped in half, there's that jagged little slight difference that's going to go one way or the other. You get one child to do that, but they have to get the piece that's left over. Now that would show you could actually have a really slow ad in nice and close on the earnestness of the child carefully doing this, knowing they're going to get second dibs while the other one watches on. It would be intense.
There's so much potential with this idea of you can split it in half, but then how do you share?
Yeah.
Just because it's 2 halves doesn't mean that automatically means we know exactly how we're going to share.
That's right. And if you're like 16 or 17-year-olds engrossed in homework, maybe you're doing some homework together with a friend, or heaven forbid, two friends, then you've got to get out your protractor and your compass and try and divide it up evenly.
Yeah, or just grab it and run.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.